But stay engaged along the way because there's more swag that we'll be giving out. Carol, you're on stage. You don't gotta rush or anything like that. We're actually doing pretty well on time here. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to you because you're going to tell us how to make it essential for people to learn on the job and not have that fall apart, because it's great in a nice insulated environment. But then when it comes time for things actually to happen, that's where things get messy. So I'm looking forward to this.
Great. Thanks so much, Chris. And thanks to 7TAPS for inviting me here. Let me get into my slides here, make sure everyone can see them. Okay, I can.
We can see it, and you are good to go.
Okay, so I love the fact that that the other two presenters here were talking about meaningful work as well. My name is Carol Delisi. I'm an instructional designer contractor for Best Friends Animal Society. And just a really quick little bit of oh, I guess I need to make sure I know where I'm going on my slides here. Sorry about that. So I have worked for Best Friends Animal Society, which is an animal sanctuary and organization that's based in Kanab, Utah. I'd love to see a round of emojis if you've heard of them before. I know a whole bunch of emojis are going by, so I'm not sure if that means that you're just excited about it or you've heard of them. They do great work across the country, and there's about 950 employees right now there. And about half of them are in animal care. So this work culminates. I've been a facilitator primarily, and instructional designer more recently in learning and development in a lot of different organizations. But when I realized I could apply those skills for an animal society that is involved in saving animals, that really kind of culminated where I was in my meaningful work journey. So I work as a contractor for them. You'll also see a little symbol there for Beaverhead Animal Shelter. That is our local shelter in Dillon, Montana, which is where I reside. And I'm chair of the board there, and sort of an unofficial learning and development person for them as well. So what you'll see as we go through is that I've worked 7TAPS into both of my volunteer work as well as my contract work. So just like we've talked about, Christy talked about it, and Advent Health speakers talked about that. There's never enough time for learning, it seems like, and especially if you are in any kind of care industry, right? So in the case of animal welfare, it doesn't stop. There are always animals out there that need care. There are people bringing animals into shelters, sometimes through no fault of their own. They need to surrender them. So there's a constant influx, and animal care doesn't stop. It's really 24/7. So what we see is that time for training is limited, probably no big news to everyone here. And access to training is limited as well, because a lot of the animal care workers that come in, they've got their phones. So like Christy said at the beginning, our phone is our companion. They've got their phones, but they don't necessarily each have a computer or a laptop. In fact, they don't. So whether you're talking about Best Friends as a big organization, or you're talking about a local shelter, there are not computers everywhere for people to learn and sign on to a system to learn. So access is limited. And then, of course, training, the need for training doesn't go away. In fact, when you're dealing with an entire population that doesn't speak your language, right? All these lovely animal companions, then certainly training is even more essential in order to provide them the care that they need. So why not try 7TAPS? That's sort of how I approached it. And I have to say that when I first started with 7TAPS was actually, I was trying to remember, I think it's a little bit over a year ago. I was fairly new to my role in the department I was working in at the time at Best Friends, and I had a very supportive manager who was very open to just let's look at all these really new to us tools, and whatever you want to try out, let's try out. So it was really great to explore all the new tools out there. And when I found 7 Taps, I have to admit, I kind of fell in love. I love the idea of micro learning, which to me is sort of this, one learning objective and brief learning. Even though I'm of a little bit of an older age, I still am uh I fall victim to what everyone else does, which is I look at a video, I'm like, oh, it's 10 minutes. That's an awful long time. So 7 Taps really appealed to me in the idea of let's give people what they need when they need it and in just the right amount. And then I actually tested it out. I loved what Daniel said earlier about like just test it out with someone. I tested it out with some of the people that I knew would give me really open feedback, and they loved it. They loved how it worked. They loved the way that they could access it. It was super, super easy for them. And then I'll just echo again too what Chris said, as well as I think Nancy said too, which is the responsiveness of 7Tap staff was amazing. I got all my questions answered. It was just really a good relationship from the start. So it wasn't really hard for me to sell it, to say, let's try this out. So there was a little bit of time where I got a chance to really just play around with it and try it out. And then finally, we had this need that came to our department, which was we want to introduce AI and how to use it at Best Friends. So we were introducing a lot of policy around guardrails, tools, and support, all with the intention of saying we can use AI actually to save more animals' lives by offloading some of those repetitive tasks to AI. But there were a lot of, back and forth pieces within that training about like, what's our message? What won't we use it for? That kind of thing. So what I'd like to share is a little bit about how we did it and what I learned along the way. The gathering content phase was actually very brief. And I have to say, I was a little overly exuberant about putting this into 7 Taps. So the initial documentation was brief. And the cool thing was, I got to try out some of the AI technology within 7 Taps, and I loved what it produced because it gave me a way to put all that content in and then just edit it instead of having to start from scratch. What we learned though was that we missed a few key stakeholders along the way, and then additional content was added. So not the it was a little bit of a messy instructional design process, actually. I really appreciated Daniel's very diligent way of going through, because I felt like I missed out on that. But we gathered feedback. We tested it with a group of learners who were content experts. And I love the reviewer function in 7 Taps. If you haven't tried that out, that was really cool. Great way to get comments back and then integrate those or ask further questions of the reviewers. What we decided to do with the AI, because it got a little bit larger than I would have liked in a micro learning session, we actually introduced it in a virtual session with a little bit of context setting around it. And then we also got the opportunity to help users understand this platform because they hadn't used it before. The other thing we were doing at the same time, just the way it worked, was introducing Workday Learning as a learning management system. So there were quite a few things going on. New LMS, 7 Taps in it, and then using 7 Taps within the Workday Learning Management System. I am happy to say that it was really quite a success considering how much we were trying to do. So the results that we achieved, it was a seamless integration into Workday, super easy to upload. Dynamic Score made some of those last minute changes super simple. I would check Workday. They were all updated there. It was really great. We got great feedback from the learners. They loved the engagement. They loved the mobile view, and they really loved having the quizzes. They said, if there was some content and they were tempted to kind of go through the content, that quiz stopped them and made them go back and make sure they knew what they were learning. So the engagement and interactivity was really great. And then we really had a high participation rate, considering they had to not only get into the learning management system, but then they actually had to take the class. 74% of our staff, and this was for all staff, so this was 950 plus people enrolled into the content. And that is amazing, because before we rolled this out, it was kind of just by chance that people would find learning. They either contacted me directly and we did a virtual session, or the online learning just kind of sat there. This was pretty incredible to get that many staff engaged. A few things, though, that we did learn, and I mentioned a couple of them already. I say curb your enthusiasm, because remember to confirm all those stakeholders. I think I took people at face value that came to me with the content. I'm like, oh, we got it. Let's just do it. And then we learned along the way. There were a few more people that wanted to comment on it. Again, the reviewer function in 7 taps really made that very easy. And then, to Daniel's point about principles of instructional design, we kind of went into rapid development mode and did a lot of iterations, but some of that would have really helped from the beginning. And then use 7 taps resources. That wasn't really a lesson learned. I just did it. And again, staff is so helpful. And then Copilot and Transform functions are really useful starting points to save time on getting these courses developed. And then test with a group of learners, just like Daniel said, test the content, test the platform. It was interesting how many people we expected to be very savvy with technology were like, oh, wait, when I click on a link, it pops up another window and then I lose the course. And we were like, that seemed like an assumption that that they would have figured it out already, like from taking other online courses, but you don't want to assume anything. So we wanted to make it super, super easy. That's why we did the virtual session and kind of demoed it and said, look, you're still here. You can get back into the course. So what I would say, an action for all of you, if you haven't done it already, create a prototype course and share it. The other thing that I'm doing with my volunteer work with our shelter is designing some learning for them. And so I'll share that here. If you'd like to scan what I've developed for our Beaverhead Animal Shelter. With this, I just put our adoption procedure into Transform, and basically then went in and edited the 7 taps course. And already we're pretty excited to get learning to our small shelter that hasn't had a lot of learning before. And again, mostly work from their phones. So thank you very, very much for allowing me to share. I didn't even get to ask my other question, which was, I'm sure a lot of you, in addition to Christy, have animals. So a round of emojis for all those lovely animals that share our homes and make our lives meaningful too. So thank you so much.
Well, you will get no shortage of emojis for animal engagement in this group. I can tell you that right now, and you can see that right there. So, Carol, thank you so much for this. What a fun topic to touch on as well. One thing I would add, and then I have one question for you that I think will really tie into some of the Q&A related to this that I think is especially relevant to your topic. So, one, I loved your point about engaging with stakeholders and also still sticking with the design principles, because it's easy to get wrapped up in the enthusiasm or people giving you stuff, and you have a cool tool that makes it easy and you can run down a path, and you can either create things that don't solve real problems, or you can go down a path only to have people go, what is this? Like, who authorized? And then you're like, oh, I thought you were the one who did. I didn't sign off on. And you're like, wow, that was a giant waste of my time. And I think everybody who's been in here has had one of those moments before where you were really eager about what you did, only to have somebody go, I
Yeah,
hate it, or that is not what
right.
I did not sign off on this. So the one question I had, especially with yours related to animals, and it's a lot of volunteer, and so there's a lot of human component to this. And I know that AI is something I really specialize in AI, and I think one of the biggest growing concerns people have around it is, how do we lose the soul, the agency of the human connection, and what that really ties into. And I think related to this especially, and we're talking about a very personal, emotional, human-centric topic. And so this thought of like AI, doesn't that just almost contradict? But you talked about how it was helpful. And so I'd be really curious your take on, how do you find AI helps you maximize that really soulful component rather than just hollowing it out? And I think that's a challenge everybody's navigating right now.
Yeah. Well, the cool thing was in working on this content, people greater than I and who were more strategic than me were thinking through how do we use that at an organization that is so people centric. And basically over and over again, we talked about the human element and the need for humans to review what AI has done.
Okay.
So there was that piece of it that, this does not stand alone. It's not like AI takes over and we go with it. It gives us something to react to and review. So we're talking about like data analysis. And we do a lot of data analysis at Best Friends because that's one of the missing links with the shelters across the country is like, and it's
Yeah.
getting better and better. Like how many animals are coming in? How many are getting adopted? Um, and what kind of programs are having what kind of effect. So AI can help us analyze the data and then we tell the story. So that was the other piece, I think, is that really the human element, we're about telling the story. The AI gives us some of the data and gives us some of the summaries, but then we have to verify it and then tell the story. And then the
I
other
love
thing
that.
we're super, super careful about is never creating something that didn't happen. So, and that's with real animals and real people.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
like, no, we are about transparency and that folds right in as one of the values that, we're not going to create something that never happened. We're
Yeah.
going to tell the real stories and use AI to hopefully make us more efficient at getting the content and the data that we need to
I love
really
that.
work to save more lives.
I love that. And two things, and then we'll just wrap here is, one, I say a lot in the work I do that if you're using AI to make you a better liar, you're using it wrong. And I think going back to your point of
100%.
manufacturing things that aren't real, like if you're using AI to make you a liar, you are
Mhm.
fundamentally using it wrong. Period. So I love that. And then you talk about the human in the loop, and that term gets thrown around a lot. Oh, keep humans in the loop, but it's more than just a human in some loop somewhere. I like to say you keep the right humans in the right loops with the right level of decision-making authority. Because if you just have something being created, whopped to the end, and somebody stamps it at the, you really have robbed it of what really AI is there to do. And even just the way you described the way you helped it consolidate, condense, make things together, but then you worked with people to actually bring out was really needed. And so I think that was a great example of how to use it well versus just
Exactly.
use it, which I think there's a
Right.
lot right now where it's just like, just use it. It'll be great. And it's like, it actually won't. It'll actually be worse than it was before. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Carol, I'm going to send you backstage and then I'm going to wrap up. Can we get one final round of emojis for Carol and the awesome work she's doing with the animals and all of that great stuff? Thank you for this, all that you're putting into that. So thank you, everybody. If this has been your first, I hope we delivered on this being a different kind of virtual experience than you're used to. If it has, please share this. We do these for free, but we do it so that we can reach more people, and we need your help with that. So if you can tell others about it, post about it, share an insight that you have, you'll get to see how engaged the team is with that. You'll engage with your posts and do all sorts of stuff with that. So go ahead and take one of your insights, share it with the world, and use that to mark your calendar for the next one, which currently is August 28th. And we will be back here for another one. And we will continue going through some of the upvoted questions. We will share the recording with all of this. So be sure to register. Sorry, August 27th, not 28th. And then before you go anywhere, I have a few more winners of swag boxes. So don't log off just yet, everybody. So we've got Andrea Vasquez, Katie DeLorme, I think, Katie DeLorme, and Jeanette Hawkinson. So I've got those three. If I said your name wrong, I am really, really sorry. I didn't mean to. You can shame me on social media if you want. You can be like, Christopher, he gave me a prize box, but boy, does he suck at pronouncing names. I'll take the heat. So congratulations to all of our winners. I genuinely hope you found this session beneficial and helpful. I love the diversity of topics. I hope this isn't your first or last session. We love doing these things, and we love being here to support you as the community, because this is just one of the great ways we support great learning and doing the best we can with the technology available to us to ultimately drive performance in organizations. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for your time, and we will see you on the other end of summer. So with that, have a great summer. Have a great summer, everybody, and have a great rest of your week.